Okay, so we are ready to begin. Thank you everyone for joining us on Zoom and Facebook Live. And today we have a very nice story, a very dramatic story. Parts of it are very sad and unfortunate, but in the end, there is a good ending. So that's why I call it a good story, at least in the end. So let's first talk about the actual story, the events that occurred, some of the drama, and then we'll go a little bit deeper into some of the details and discover some insights, and we will finish each part with a tip from the most successful person of the Torah, at least the only person that the Torah calls successful. So we're going to cover two tips. We'll have two parts to this. So first we'll go to the story, and then we'll go a little bit deeper into the insights. So the story takes us back a few thousand years to the days of Yaakov, Jacob, and he settles in the city of Hebron in Israel with his family. He has 12 sons, one daughter, and they settle in Hebron. Now, out of the 12 sons that Yaakov has, he does have one favorite. And the favorite son is Yosef. Yosef, his mother passed away at a very young age. His mother is Yosef's mother. Rachel is the one who Yaakov loved most. Yaakov favored Yosef because of these reasons, maybe others as well. But Yosef was definitely his favorite. Now, because of this extra special treatment that Yosef received, and it didn't go unnoticed by the brothers, the rest of the family, they were, of course, very jealous of Yosef because of this, because he was favored. Not only that, Yosef shared with his brothers two dreams that he had. And both of these dreams had the same theme, and they predicted that he, Yosef, would rule over his brothers. Now, of course, this is not a great thing to say to people who are already mad at you, people who are already jealous of you. So, of course, this caused them to be even more jealous and to hate him even more. So it was not a good relationship, to put it mildly, between Yosef and his brothers. Finally, the day came when two of the brothers, Shimon and Levi, plotted to kill Yosef. It's a very, very unfortunate, very sad thing that brothers are plotting to kill their brother, but this is in fact what happened. Now, they were out in the field, and Shimon and Levi, they see him coming from the distance, and this is what they decide to do. But Reuven, who's the oldest brother, he intervenes, and he convinces them to not to kill Yosef, but instead to throw him into a pit. And Reuven thought to himself, and his plan was that he would return, shortly afterwards, after everybody would leave, and he would rescue Yosef from the pit and bring him home back to his father. So Reuven had very good intentions, and he was hoping to rescue his brother. But in the meantime, before Reuven had a chance to rescue Yosef, Yehuda, who was another brother, he organized the sale of Yosef, sold as a slave to a group of Ishmaelites who were passing by. So Yehuda was also against killing their brother Yosef, but he thought that he deserved something. So together they sold him as a slave to these passing Ishmaelites. How did these brothers break the news to their father? So they took Yosef's special coat, which was given to him Because he was favored, he had a special coat that only he had. They took this coat, they dipped it into goat's blood to make it look like he was attacked by an animal, a wild animal. They showed this coat to Yosef, to their father Yaakov. They said, we found Yosef's coat full of blood. And so Yaakov believed that Yosef was attacked and killed. And of course, he was heartbroken. In the meantime, Yosef was sold a couple more times, and he finally ended up in Egypt, sold to a man named Potiphar, who was one of the ministers of King Pharaoh. Yosef was a very charming person. He was liked by Potiphar, and after just a short time, he became the manager of Potiphar's entire property, his entire estate. And life was becoming a little bit better for Yosef. He wasn't just a slave. Now he had a pretty good position. He was well liked. He was trusted, and things were going well. Just when things were going smoothly for him, Potiphar's wife desires Yosef, who's a handsome and charismatic man. But Yosef rejects her, and when he does, actually repeatedly, when he keeps rejecting her, finally the day comes that she accuses him of attempted rape. And because of this, Yosef is thrown into prison. Another unfortunate episode in Yosef's life. In prison, Yosef again is liked by the jailers, by people in charge, and he's trusted by them after just a short time. And Yosef is appointed an administrator of the entire prison. So again, he was able to be liked and trusted by the authorities and by the people in charge there. It was one day in the prison, Yosef was doing his rounds, and he meets the King Pharaoh's butler and baker. They each had a dream, and they were puzzled by their dreams. So Yosef listens to the dreams, he interprets the dreams, and after he does, he tells the butler, you're going to be freed. That was part of the interpretation of the dream. And he says, please, when you come back to the palace, when you come back to Pharaoh, please intercede on my behalf with Pharaoh. Please remind him that I'm here, and tell him that I was falsely accused and I shouldn't be here. Yosef's predictions come true. Butler is returned to his previous position as the butler of Pharaoh, but unfortunately he forgets about Yosef, and he does not mention Yosef to the king. Okay, so this is the story. This is the story of Yosef, and the story in this week's Torah portion. It's not the end of the story. There's a whole lot that comes afterwards, but this is the part of the story that we're going to focus on because in this week's Torah portion. And now I'd like to zoom in on some of the details and gain some insight into Yosef's life, into the story, and some lessons that we could learn from it. Okay, any questions about the story, please just let me know, put it in the chat box, just say it on the Zoom. I'm also going to pay attention to the Facebook Live. I'm just opening that now on my so I could see if there's any comments there. Okay, so moving right along, the only person that the Torah calls successful is in this week's Torah portion. So the Torah only calls one person. Imagine the entire 5 books of Moses, only one person is called successful. Who is that? Who is that successful person? That is Yosef. Yosef. Why is that? Why does the Torah call him successful? So Yosef's gift was that he had the ability to rise to the top of any situation he was placed in. So when he was sold into slavery, when he became a slave, after just a short time, he turned into the manager of his master's home. He was thrown into prison. after just a short time, he was appointed administrator of the entire prison. And at the end of the story, this is a spoiler, Yosef becomes the second most powerful person in the entire Egypt, which was the superpower at the time. So Yosef always found a way to rise to the top of whatever situation he was placed in. Now, the question is, what was the secret to Yosef's success? How did he remain so optimistic in the face of such extreme challenges and extreme situations that, if people who had just one of these episodes will probably have a difficult life. Look how many problems, look how many challenges Yosef had, all, a combination of so many extreme problems. So what was the secret to Yosef's success? How did he do it? How did he remain optimistic and successful? So to answer this question and to gain insight into Yosef, who he was and into his success, we need to pay closer attention to Yosef's dreams. Now, like we mentioned in the story, in the beginning of the story, his brothers hated him, and Yosef had two dreams which made them hate him even more. And both of these dreams had the same theme. The theme was that Yosef, was destined to be a leader and a ruler over his brothers. But let's look at these two dreams because the details are important. It's just a short paragraph. I have the text in front of me, so I'll just read it for everyone to hear. And then we'll talk a little bit more about it. So here's the dream, translated into English. And Yosef dreamed a dream and told his brothers, and they continued to hate him. And he said to them, "Listen now to this dream which I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the midst of the field. And behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves encircled it and prostrated themselves to my sheaf." And he again dreamed another dream, and he related it to his brothers, and he said, "Behold, I have dreamed another dream, and behold, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were prostrating themselves to me." Okay, so these are the two dreams, very similar. Each one is basically talking about how all of the others would bow down and be ruled by Yosef. So in the first dream, it's bundles of wheat, and Yosef's bundle is standing upright, and all the others are bowing down, prostrating themselves before Yosef. And in the second dream, it's about the sun, moon, and stars, how they're all bending to and bowing down to Yosef. Now, two dreams that have the same message. Why the need for two dreams? They're saying the same thing. Why did Yosef have two of them? Now, if you pay attention to the dreams, you see that the first dream is about earthly things. It's about grain. It's about wheat. The second dream is about more heavenly things: the sun, the moon, and stars. Now, Yosef took a very strong message from these two dreams and from the combination of them, the fact that there were two and they talked about different things. And what Yosef understood was that the dreams were conveying that the material, the physical, and the spiritual are not two separate entities, but in fact, they're two layers of the same reality. Okay, so what does that mean practically? What did Yosef take from that? What did he understand? Yosef understood that if he would become a leader, and he believed that he would become a ruler and a leader over his brothers and probably many others, he understood that he would be responsible to provide for them food and other material, physical essentials that anybody would need. But he understood that as a leader, he would also need to give spiritual insight to his brothers and to, whoever else he'd be ruling over. And there was a fundamental difference between Yosef and his brothers in their method of staying connected, if you will, to holiness and to spirituality. So the brothers believed, all of Yosef's brothers believed that in order to stay connected and to remain holy, they needed to withdraw from society. And so their occupation, for the most part, was shepherding. So they liked to go into the to go into the fields and to just hang out there, be alone, be separate from society, and in this way they could remain spiritual, remain pure, remain holy, not be distracted by worldly matters. This is what Yosef's brothers believed. Now, Yosef knew, and Yosef's belief was that, in fact, it was possible to remain spiritually connected even while being involved with worldly matters, and even being heavily involved in things like the Egyptian culture and the Egyptian economy, and later in the story we see how Yosef had a tremendous impact on the entire country, the entire economy, and everything that was going on. And so Yosef understood that materialism and spirituality were not two things that couldn't work together. And it was not necessary to separate yourself and to withdraw from society in order to remain to remain connected to God and to spirituality. But in fact, Yosef understood that they were one and the same. So two layers of the same reality, and that's why it's possible for them to coexist. It's possible to be involved in worldly matters and at the same time remain connected to what you know to be true, right, godly, and spiritual. How does such a thing come about? What was this belief that Yosef had? What was the thought process? The thought process was that in every single situation, no matter how difficult, no matter how unusual, no matter how strange the situation might be, there is always a deeper layer, and there's always a hidden spark that you need to seek out and find. So there's a certain heavenly spark that's in every situation, in every circumstance, and this is the purpose of that particular situation. So Yosef understood that while you're involved in the world, in worldly matters, in the culture, in the economy, in society, in whatever situation you're in whatever matter you're involved with, there's something there, that there's some purpose, and including a spiritual purpose for you to accomplish. And so Yosef understood that even in difficult situations, and he experienced the most difficult situations. He was in prison. He was sold as a slave. He was abused. He was falsely accused. So Yosef really knew difficult situations firsthand. He really experienced, a difficult life, but he was able to understand, and he was able to see that beneath the surface there's a heavenly spark, and there's something to uncover. There's a purpose. There's a purpose to this experience, to this circumstance that is just waiting, an opportunity that's waiting to be uncovered. And this is why Yosef's spirit could not be crushed. even though he had all of these problems, even though he had all of these challenges, he understood that there's a certain hidden energy that is just waiting, waiting to be uncovered, a certain opportunity that's waiting to be revealed. And this is how Yosef was able to keep his spirits up, stay optimistic, and remain on a optimistic high. Keep his spirits high. He understood that there's something beneath the surface waiting to be uncovered. So this is the first tip. The first tip is that Yosef teaches us that in order to be successful, don't just take a situation at face value. Don't just see that this is difficult, this is challenging, this is not where I want to be. Instead of allowing those thoughts to go through your head, look for the heavenly spark. Look for the purpose. Look for something beneath the surface. There is some opportunity that is waiting to be discovered, waiting to be uncovered. When you find that opportunity, all of a sudden everything changes. You realize that you're here you realize that you're here for this opportunity. You're here to extract this spark, and that is what kept Yosef going. That's what kept him optimistic, and that's what kept his spirits up. His spirit could never be crushed. And we have the same ability. It's not just Yosef was a special person, but we all have the same ability, and we have the ability to find the deeper, the deeper spark and the deeper purpose and opportunity in every situation. We just have to look for it, and hopefully we can find it. So that is the first tip. If anybody has a question, please let me know. I'm just going to look at the comment box, also Facebook, to see if there's anything there. Okay, so moving right along, we have again analyzing another part of the story of Yosef's life, zooming in to one part, to some details, and to gain some more insight from Yosef's life. Now, arguably, Yosef is the biblical character who suffers the most in the early years of his life and beyond, but especially in the early years of his life. Think about who Yosef was and what he had to go through. First of all, at a very young age, he was orphaned. His mother passed away at a very young age. He was hated by his own brothers, by his own family. He was abused. He was almost killed. He was sold into slavery. He was accused of attempted rape. He was thrown into prison. And to top it all off, his prison sentence was supposed to be a life sentence. He was not expecting to come out of prison. So at this point in Yosef's life, Yosef had every right to be bitter. He could have withdrawn into himself. He could have, like many prisoners do, he could have allowed his thoughts of anger and to totally consume him. He was a victim, and these thoughts would have been justified. He was truly a victim of false charges, so he had every right to be sad, to be depressed, to be bitter, to be withdrawn. And these thoughts could have totally and completely consumed him. His dreams of getting together, becoming reunited with his family, were basically crushed forever, because now he was thrown into prison for life, and there was no way out, and there was very little place for hope. I mean, he was serving a life sentence in the prison in the Egyptian prison system. So he could have really spent all of his time being totally consumed in self-pity. But taking all of this into account, a very unusual episode occurred in the in the prison cell one morning, and I'll read you the exact text. Just again, a short paragraph, very very interesting episode between Yosef and some of the prisoners. And here's the small episode. And it happened that the king's cupbearer and baker transgressed against their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was enraged at these two, and he placed them into the prison where Yosef was confined. The chamberlain of the butchers appointed Yosef to them, and he attended to them. Okay, so Yosef was looking after, because he was, the administrator. He had some position in the prison, so he was responsible for these two prisoners as well, for the butler and for the baker. Okay, so here's where the interesting part of the story comes. Yosef came to them in the morning. He saw them, and behold, they were aggrieved. He asked, "Why are your faces downcast today?" Okay, so Yosef comes in one morning and he sees that they're down, and he asks them, "Why are your faces downcast today?" Okay, now think about it for a second. These people were prisoners in jail. Yosef was a prisoner in jail. He was serving a life sentence. And nevertheless, he came to these prisoners in the morning and he said, "Why are you looking down today? Why are you sad? Why are you downcast? Why are you feeling bad?" And this is such an unbelievable thing, because you would think this is how everybody is supposed to look, and this is how everybody feels. And Yosef should have been so consumed in his own self-pity, in his own anger, and his own bitterness. How could he even notice someone else feeling down? And even if he noticed someone else feeling down, that is to be expected. This is a prison. It's not a park where people are sitting around enjoying themselves. But nevertheless, Yosef asked this question. He said, why are your faces downcast today? And this shows us how sensitive Yosef was to other people. So even in this extreme situation, and even in this very difficult situation, he never ceased to reach out to other people who he knew were hurting and were in need. So Yosef did not fall into this trap of depression and self-pity and anger and being withdrawn. Not only did he not fall into all of that, but on the contrary, you could tell that he remained optimistic, so much so that he saw somebody was a little bit more sad or a little bit more down than the day before, and he noticed that. He was so sensitive, so extremely sensitive to other people who were hurting and in need, that he noticed their faces. He noticed how they were feeling, and this is an unbelievable thing. He reached out to them. Yosef always reached out to people, even in such a dire situation, even in such a sad place, in such a sad time. Now, ultimately, it was this genuine act of brotherhood, of caring, that brought salvation to the entire region. That's the continuation of the story in next week's Torah portion. Think about it for a moment. What would happen if Yosef did not realize and did not notice someone else's pain? How would the story unfold then? But the point is that Yosef reached out to someone else who was hurting. He reached out to others in need. And this was if you think about it, if you think about where Yosef was coming from, this was in fact an unbelievable thing. Now, um, Yosef represents the abused person. He represents the abused child, the abused spouse, or student, or employee. So he really speaks for these people. He speaks for the slave, for the captive, for the person who's wrongly convicted, for the people who are discriminated against. This was Yosef's life. So Yosef is really a voice for these people. He's a voice for people who suffer because of reasons that are beyond their control. He's a voice for people who were never given a chance, who from the very beginning, were destined to whatever challenges and problems they have. But as much as Yosef is a voice for them, and as much as Yosef speaks for them, Yosef also speaks to them. And Yosef has a message for them. And in a very gentle and non-judgmental way, Yosef says, and Yosef urges them not to retreat into self-pity and to bitterness. He tells them that, this urge to blame others and to be bitter, to be sad, to be depressed. The urge for these feelings are overwhelming and overpowering. But Yosef says that even though you earned yourself, so to speak, you earned yourself the right to be bitter and to be removed and to be withdrawn, and you don't you could ask yourself, and it's a fair question. It's fair to ask, why should I smile when no one smiled at me? Why should I notice someone else when I was never noticed? These are fair questions, and they earn the right to feel this bitterness and to feel this sadness and depression. But these questions of, why should I care and why should I smile, they earn the right to ask these questions. But Yosef tells them from experience. He tells them, don't fall into this trap. Don't become a victim. Don't get stuck in this never-ending spiral, downward spiral of sadness, depression, self-pity, being withdrawn. Don't fall into this. And Yosef says from experience, if you could change your attitude or focus your attitude and reach out to another person in need, reach out to someone else who is hurting, this could literally change the world. And that's in fact what happened. It changed the entire region. And as we see in the continuation of the story in the next week's Torah portion, we see how because of these few words, and just the fact that Yosef noticed another person's hurting, another person in need, this literally changed the entire region, had an impact on the entire world. So Yosef says to these people, Yosef tells people who are suffering, he says to them, instead of being a victim to your life situation in a very humble way, and in a very gentle way, and in a very non-judgmental way, he says instead focus on another person. Focus on being there for another person, helping another person, reaching out to them, seeing how they are. And this is the second tip that we learn from Yosef, who the Torah calls a successful person. This is the only person who the Torah calls a successful person. This is the second tip that we learn from Yosef, and that is to say hello to people. you see somebody, say hello, say, how are you? How are you doing? How are you feeling? That's what Yosef did that day in prison. Don't underestimate the power of small words or a small gesture. As we see in the story of Yosef, it could literally change the world. It could change the world it could change the world of this individual person, and it could also have a much bigger impact, an impact on the entire region and possibly on the entire world. And so you should never underestimate the power of small words. Say hello, notice people, see how they're doing, and take a moment, even if it's just a very small moment, to take interest and to pay attention to someone, especially someone who is in need, someone who is hurting. And ultimately, in the end, this will benefit you as well. That's the second tip. The second tip is, it might sound very easy, very powerful, very powerful. And maybe it's not as easy as it sounds, because we're so consumed in our own lives and our own issues and our own troubles, we don't notice other people. But stop for a moment and notice them. Notice the people who you see all the time on the street, at the bus stop, in the supermarket. Take a moment to say hello, to see how they're doing, see how they're feeling. And this is the second tip. And just to really bring this home, and to really make this more relevant and more relatable, I'd like to share one of my favorite stories. The story takes us back a few decades, to Argentina, where there's out of the city, there's this huge food production plant. So this is a huge factory with hundreds of employees, and Pedro is the guard who's responsible to stand at the front of the building, and he's there the whole day. He's responsible for the people who come in, come out, responsible for keeping everybody safe and for everything that goes on inside the factory. It's the end of a long and tiring workday, and Pedro is very happy that the day's coming to an end, and the manager is coming to lock up the doors. So the manager comes to lock up, and Pedro says, "Wait a minute, there's somebody still in the building. There's somebody still in the building. The rabbi is still in the building." And the manager is not happy that he has to go back in and see who's still in there before he locks up. But he turns around, and he listens to the guard, and he goes to see what happens. But he comes back empty-handed. He says, "No, nobody's in there. The rabbi's not there. Nobody's there." So Pedro persists. He says, "No, the rabbi is certainly in there. Please go check again." The manager goes back in. A few minutes later, he comes back again empty-handed. There's nobody there. He says it's time to lock up. Now, in the meantime, just a few meters away, a little bit more, inside a walk-in freezer, the rabbi is sitting there. He got locked into this walk-in freezer, and it's so cold, and he has no protection. And slowly he feels he feels that he's losing consciousness. He's barely conscious, and he kind of muses to himself that this is what it feels like to die. And he feels like he's about to die, and he's about to meet his creator. And he just barely manages to say his final words, the words of Shema Yisrael, words that people say on their deathbed. But all of a sudden, as if in a dream, he hears in the distance, he overhears the manager and the guard screaming to each other. The manager says, "I'm locking up," and Pedro says, but maybe the rabbi is in some trouble. Let me go back, let me go check myself. And as soon as the manager heard the word trouble, as if something, some bulb turned on in his head, and he immediately dashed to the freezer. He opens the freezer, and lo and behold, he finds the rabbi, and he saves the rabbi from dying in that freezer. Of course, he was rushed to the hospital, but in the end, he was okay, and he survived the incident. But that was a very extremely close call. Had the door been locked, had they gone home, he would have certainly died in that freezer. So the next day, the manager came to the guard, Pedro, and he said, "How did you know? How did you know that the rabbi was still in the building? I'm so curious. How are you so sure? How did you know?" And Pedro, the guard, said, "It's very simple. Every single day when the rabbi, there are hundreds of employees who come into this factory every single day. But every single morning, the rabbi, as he was walking in, with a big smile, would say good morning. And on his way out, he would look at me and he would say, have a good night." Every single day, day in, day out. First, I thought, maybe why is he being so nice to me? Maybe he wants a favor, but there was no favor that he was asking, and that was just what the rabbi did every day. In the morning, he said good morning with a smile, and in the evening, he said good night with a smile. Pedro looks at the manager and he said, "Yesterday morning, I got my good morning. And I waited the whole day, like I always do, for somebody to notice me, somebody to pay attention to me. And I was waiting for my good night, but it didn't come. And so I knew for certain that the rabbi was still in there." This is a true story that happened, and it's such a powerful story. And for me, I see two things in the story. First of all, the power of a small word, of a small hello. The guard, nobody noticed him. He stands there every day. Everyone knows that he's there, and he's kind of like part of the furniture of the building. He's a prop. He's always there, always protecting everybody. He knows he's there, but nobody stopped to say hello. And look what it meant for this guard. He would stand there during the day and wait to receive his good morning and wait to receive his good night. That's how much it meant to someone. So think about a tiny word. What does it take to notice? What does it take to say hello? What does it take to ask, how are you? Such a small thing, but it could mean so much to someone. Not only that, a second thing we see from the story is the unbelievable impact that it could have. It could come back and save your life. In this story, it was because the guard was waiting for his good night that this rabbi's life was saved. And in fact, he was rescued from the freezer. So this is two tips from the only person who the Torah calls successful. Two tips from Yosef. First of all, to always find the deeper spark and the opportunity that's waiting, that is beneath the surface of whatever life situation you're in. Remain optimistic, keep your spirits high, because there's some spark, there's some opportunity that's waiting to be revealed. And that's how Yosef kept his spirits up. That is how Yosef was never crushed, even in the most difficult situations. And Yosef knew what a difficult situation really, really means. And to wait for the opportunity and find the opportunity that is there, that is waiting to be uncovered. That's the first step. And the second thing is to reach out to another person. Reach out, say hello, say how are you, especially to someone who might be hurting, especially someone who is in need.